Okay, great. We are live, and welcome to the full moon in Taurus Q&A. And we're going to be talking about our questions that are related to this full moon. And you know, if you've got some questions that you would like answered, and we're waiting for any questions to come through from the patrons. I'm more than happy to respond to that today. I'm going to go ahead and actually just start with a question that was asked around the planetary nodes of Chiron. And I really like this question because it's definitely something that I'm interested in, especially when I'm looking at planetary nodes. It always excites my interest around going really, really deep into the astrology, deep into the collective field. So for those of you that don't know, I actually wrote it down. The planetary nodes of Chiron are situated at 26 degrees. Here we go, 26 degrees Aries and 3 degrees Taurus, right? So between 26 degrees Aries and 3 degrees Taurus, the south node of Chiron will sit. And of course, the polarity to that is the north node, which is Chiron, right? North node of Chiron sitting between 26 degrees Libra and 3 degrees Scorpio. Now, for me, that's really significant because my Pluto, my Mercury, and my Sun all sit in the north node of Chiron, right? And so does my MC as well. And currently, at the moment, we have Venus retrograde that's going to be making a connection to the Sun. In fact, it's going to be aligning with the Sun tomorrow, and that's in Scorpio, of course, 2 degrees. And then we've also got Uranus sitting at 0 degrees Taurus in a retrograde form. And then we've got the nodes of the moon that are actually connecting through the squares to these planets. And so, as we spoke about this yesterday in our video on the full moon, we've got this interesting square where the moon was actually conjuncting Venus, and we've got the the sun was conjuncting Venus, and the moon was conjuncting Uranus, right? Just got to get into the flow of these things over here. Anyway, and they're obviously squaring the nodes, which was really, really significant, the alchemical process. And for a great deal of time, this energy, I just want to recap, has been influencing the collective's way of reality. Of course, the nodes always shape the way that we are moving. Now, when you take a layer of a sort of planetary node, not in this case Chiron's nodes, you're actually dealing with the history of the asteroid itself. Okay, so when you're looking at and the trajectory of the asteroid, and in fact, all planets themselves have nodal axes. That's how we're able to actually look at the karmic trajectory of a planet. And this is actually something, I'm opening up the conversation in a very big way. So if you're not really following me at this point in time, that's okay. It's just more of a sort of sit back and absorb thing, because I do make the connections along the road, right? So when you're looking at planets themselves, I like to encourage you to look at the planets as pools of memory, okay, that all have a experience of life, well, not life on Earth, but life in the sense that they have their own life, their own trajectory, their own cosmic story that they are essentially moving through. And we embody those, right? We embody these energies. And that is the way that we actually materialize the essence of an archetype, or the essence of a planetary signature. So it's really amazing to me to be able to look at planetary nodes of planets itself. And on the internet, I think if you go and search EA Zoom meetings and you type in the south node of Neptune, there are a couple of videos that are done by different EA astrologers. And I've also done one with the south node in Aquarius, right? The south node of Neptune in Aquarius. And it gives a very larger perspective of the types of dynamics that we as a human race have been experiencing over a greater period of time. So when you look at the planets from the lens of having their own story, and we're able to, in a sense, objectify those stories by looking at their own nodal axis. In other words, here's the planet of Uranus sitting at 0 degrees Taurus, but the planetary nodes of Uranus are sitting in south node in Sagittarius and the north node in Gemini. So when an energy, when Uranus is moving through the signs, it's also consistently influencing, reshaping, and evolving its own nodal axis, which is in the Gemini Scorpio signs. So, right, so there's this extra layer of depth that's occurring, and this can be very overwhelming to take in straight away when listening to the stream and looking at astrology and saying, wow, I'm trying to understand my Saturn in my chart. I'm trying to understand my Pluto in my chart, and now you're telling me there's planetary nodes that I have to go and look at, so there's no need to rush into this process and go, okay, I've got to figure it out, because I know how sort of disturbing that can be to a certain degree. But the point here is that when we're looking at planetary nodes of any planets themselves, there's going to be some depth that we can access. So when we have something like this, where the south node of Chiron has Uranus transiting it at the moment, the first thing that we want to do in this analysis is objectify that the best way to grasp a planetary node in the collective consciousness, in other words, what it means in the collective consciousness, is to imagine an iceberg, okay? And at the tip of the iceberg is your conscious sense of what this energy can represent to you and the experiences in your life and what it has played out, right? And then beneath the water, there is a larger element of dense material that is, in a sense, also contributing to the overall way in which a energy is being influenced at the top. In other words, this denser material that sits beneath the surface is also present. And so we would call this the unconscious, right? You're unconscious. And Jung, for instance, he worked a lot with looking at the subconscious, the unconscious, and a lot of psychology and the way that we have tried to develop our understanding of the human condition in the mind in psychology also integrates the idea of this unconscious sense of self. Now, when we look at Uranus in the chart, you can immediately start to get access to subconscious or unconscious memory that each of us carry. Okay, so Uranus in the chart, like I said, reflects the unconscious, the individual unconscious memories that we carry with us, right? This underneath the iceberg. So if we go to the south node of Chiron, Chiron's currently sitting at 28 degrees Pisces at the moment, or 29 degrees Pisces, and it's moving through Pisces, and the top of the iceberg is Chiron in Pisces at 29 degrees, but yet the collective, right, has deep memory within inside of it that pertains to the south node in Aries Taurus. Now, to me, this just straight away, right, not necessarily speaking directly to the multiple ways that this manifests, but just at an overall sense, this south node of Chiron sitting here relates to the civilizations that were very patriarchal dominated. Okay, so this assertion, this need to, so our memory that is rooted in a very assertive behavior, that is rooted in dominance, that is rooted in our ability to need to force and conquer, and what that has meant for the people that have been on the receiving end of this type of behavior. So when we look at the Roman era, when we look at the Greek era, when we look at something that's more recent, like for instance when like Britain was moving around the globe and conquering different countries, and in a sense, like if you've ever watched Eddie Izzard, he'll be talking about "Have you got a flag?" in these comedy sketches. Have you got a flag? He was reflecting to how the people would, you know, like the British Empire would travel to different parts of the world and then conquer it and be like, okay, we're going to put our flag down. Yeah, this is ours. I mean, for me, born in South Africa, and looking at the lineage of my own personal life, I can definitely see that my lineage comes back to Europe, right? And Africa and South Africa was conquered by Netherlands and the Great Britain, you know. And if you look at the way that it worked, Great Britain came from the bottom, and the Netherlands and Europe, sort of, you know, Spain and Belgium, and they all came from the top. And so you actually have this interesting split in the country where one part of the country is very much the old language, at least, is rooted in British rule, and the top part of the country has a lot of Afrikaans or Dutch influence. Okay, so the context is what are our memories associated with that behavior? Okay, what are our memories associated with that behavior, and how does that bleed into the generations that get born into the world, and then how does the grandparents' values and truths and perspectives of life influence the generation, and then how does that next generation take on those conditioning factors and then integrate it into the next. And so what you're seeing here is, in a sense, the collective's subconscious baggage being pulled through in each generation. Okay, so we each carry with us this deep sensitivity to violation of our personal boundaries, the repression of our feminine rights, as it were. You know, we can look at the diversity that has occurred through racism, and what types of you know, deep pain is associated with diversity, or should I say the divide that is taken through racism, as an example. So again, coming back to South Africa, you know, you can look currently at the country at the moment, and you can see that a lot of the pain, a lot of the separation, a lot of the darkness that exists there is deeply rooted in the pain and agony and rage that is sitting in the collective's consciousness around those times, right? And Pluto through Capricorn, we're all experiencing the inherited choices of our forefathers. We're all experiencing right now the actions of past experiences and how we're living with the consequences of that. I mean, you have to look at America right now, and you can see that a lot of you guys that are currently in the States and are feeling this, where there's so much divide in communities and cultures, or race, and there's so much divide around there being a separation where there's a wounded ego. And this is what I want to get into in terms of the Chiron nodal axis, okay? Because it's in the Libra Aries axis, we're dealing with interrelationship, right? We're dealing with human interrelationship. And if I integrate the thought process as well as the intention for what is called nonviolent communication, it would be a very beautiful way to see how the south node of Chiron and the north node of Chiron are interplaying with humanity's ability to empathize with the other in a way that bypasses the ego that has been severely threatened and traumatized through isolation, rejection, war, aggression, and behavior that is not rooted in acknowledgement or, you know, being present, but more along the lines of being very, very sensitive to being pointed at. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If you start a conversation with somebody that you point fingers at, right? You say, you are doing this to me, as an example, or this has, you know, immediately when that energy comes out, without even if your intention is to pull the sword of truth, as it were, the subconscious sensitivity towards the feeling of persecution or rejection or separation or not feeling embraced, or the feeling of security to feel safe in a place of vulnerability, because that is not present in the dialogue, the heart's already shut down. And because the heart's already shut down, we're immediately in separation. We're immediately in duality. Now, there are multiple ways that you can see the manifestation of South Node and Chiron playing out within our lives. And one of the ways that we can see that is through things like gender role assignments. Okay. The influence of humanity's idea that, we've had this gender role assignments, and man does this, woman does this, and then the repression that comes along with those roles that don't honor the anima animus within our own individual sense of self, which is this inner sense of feminine or masculine that is, existing simultaneously. So there's one identity that gets taken on board, and the other identity gets repressed, just as an example. And then another layer to this, going back to the non-violent communication, is where there has been a deep threat. Okay, we just need to think of the trigger that exists within the collective consciousness around 9/11. We have to think of the trigger that exists within the collective consciousness in the bombings that took place in various parts of the country, in the world. Okay, we have to look at the war that is existing currently in multiple places in the world. We have to look at how governments and societies are formed where there is a deep disconnect between the nurturing capacity and our ability to see people in their own woundedness. Now, how does this play out within the context of this full moon, and how is the Uranus transit at the moment, in a sense, activating a lot of the subconscious memory that exists within the collective's field around a lot of these dynamics that are taking place? You can see in the world at the moment, there's a tremendous amount of suffering around people not being able to fully interact with each other in a healthy way, because the triggers of the wounded ego are so intense that it really, really does take a tremendous amount of presence to be heart-centered enough to open in an empathetic way and connect where there has been separation, where there has been woundedness, where there has been that destruction of feeling safe, And then we can even take it one step further, and we can look at how right now a lot of the needs that have been associated with our human existence have been rooted in a paradigm of thinking that no longer is being supported at this point in time. So if we enter into the South Node of, or into Uranus's Neptune's conjunction in Capricorn, and we look at when that conjunction took place and what it brought for us as a human race, and how Uranus and Neptune, these outer planets, moved through Aquarius and brought us technology that we're interfacing with right now. And how in, say, for instance, the 1960s, we never had the capacity to be as transparent as we are right now with the world. Okay? So transparency being a very profound thing that is now available. And what is occurring is that it's very difficult for people to be, in a sense, behaving from that woundedness and getting away with it because of the nature of the internet, because of the nature of transparency. So we look at things like, for instance, what just recently happened in the States. I can't remember the names of the people, and maybe somebody in the chat can give me that those names. But there was I don't think he was a senator. I don't think he was that at all. He was I can't remember exactly what his role is, but he essentially had been accused of behavior that wasn't appropriate, and that he was denying his behavior towards towards this female, and she was essentially speaking up. And we're talking about the conditioning factor around the masculine's behavior interfacing with the feminine's behavior, and how the lack of trust can exist within the female, or the feminine voice, and how difficult it is for the voice to actually be as equally met in this kind of very male-dominated world. Okay. And it's not to say that, like, because if we focus on that, it's very easy for us to get deeply, yeah, thank you very much to the person that was mentioning it in the chat. It's very easy for us to get so caught up in the drama of the pain and the suffering that we lose sight of what is actually materializing that at a deeper level. So with Uranus transiting over the south node of Uranus, of Chiron at this point in time, what it's trying to do is awaken within the collective consciousness these patterns of wounded material that don't necessarily have to be, released in the way that these archetypes are going, okay, humanity, we're now going to do this for you. It's not about that. It's just that it's moving through that period. It's moving through the area, and we're now awakened to where this distortion and damage and misalignment has taken place. And we have to, in a sense, work with it. Now, individually within our lives, we're all being, in a sense, deeply conditioned by the context of these more larger cycles and how they are, bringing up to the surface in our own personal ego what is needing to be acknowledged maybe as where pain and suffering has taken place, and how that separation is what is not allowing us to see fully the relation that we have to ourselves and to another, okay? Because the North Node being in Libra, it's indicating that the healing dynamic here is how we're able to integrate compassionately and empathetically and relate through inclusion and to feel embraced through the process. To allow ourselves to see that there is this woundedness that is present with us right now, that is essentially moving through our ego, and it's a really big job to actually clear. But luckily, there are a lot of supporting platforms out there at the moment, one of them being something that I truly believe in, which is the process of nonviolent communication and what it's attempting to do. Even if it's just about allowing you to reconnect with the essence of what is your own personal orientation, right? Because it's Libra Aries again, so you're also looking about self-understanding, right? So it's allowing us to communicate with each other in a way that acknowledges this subconscious trauma that we do bring with us, and how that is needing to be, in a sense, cleared from our psyche, or at least acknowledged and healed in our psyche, for us to be more whole and fuller within ourselves, the capacity to bring deeper nourishment into ourselves, right? Deeper relatability. And it's a tough gig. It's a really, really tough gig, because it's not something that you just go, oh, okay, mentally I know this now, so therefore I've got to go and apply it. There are going to be moments where being able to work through complex PTSD and subconscious triggers that essentially fry the electrical system are going to be present, and it's part of where we are right now. How does that affect the nodal axis? How does that affect the current luminaries at the moment in terms of this full moon? Well, the way I see it is that, Aquarius being the context of how we are to liberate ourselves from outdated patterns of behavior and to accelerate our ability to integrate with ourselves in a communion-orientated way, then you can see that with Uranus transiting over the south node of Chiron, it's in a sense doing something really, really magical, really, really big. But you really have to be sensitive to it to see this ongoing trajectory that is ultimately what we as the human race are going to be experiencing and are experiencing right now, which is the awakening of this subconscious realm. And eventually at some point being, when Pluto goes into Aquarius and Pluto makes a return to the exact moment or the exact place that Chiron, so Chiron was discovered at I think 1 degrees, 2 degrees Taurus, right? So when Pluto reaches Aquarius, it's going to reach a specific point in which Uranus was discovered, and Chiron will also be at the exact point when Uranus was discovered and when Pluto will reach in Aquarius. So we're actually, for the first time, going to be witnessing the full integration of a Uranian cycle of our evolution. So where we are right now is in a period of integrating a Uranian component into our psyche, which is the awareness of the subconscious. So the experience of the veil, you know, becoming thinner and thinner for us to be able to see this multidimensional self is fully present with us. And Uranus transiting over the south node over here of Chiron is giving us this capacity to heal through some of the deeper complexes that we as a human race carry collectively, that essentially separates us because of the darkness that has occurred through, you know, the last 6,000 years as an example of, you know, masculine development. You know, there's nothing wrong with the masculine development. We've just reached a point now where it can't continue to go forward anymore because it's just destructive. So we need to be bringing back the feminine principle. We need to be bringing back the acknowledgement of what that is, which is why a lot of Pluto and Virgos will relate to this archetypal healing structure of the body, right? Coming back to the body, coming back to nature. So it's a big deal, and the reason why it's effective on the nodal axis is because the nodes are actually moving out of course, Leo Aquarius, which is where validation and, you know, the recognition and the validation of your sense of self, and in a Capricorn Cancer, this is integration, right? When you're looking at Cancer Capricorn, we're looking at the process of how we emotionally integrate ourselves within the definitions of our society, and the rules and the boundaries. So now we're ready to define ourselves, but the nodes of the moon moving into Cancer Capricorn will naturally begin to, well, no, they won't, because yes, they will begin to square Chiron's nodes. So we will begin to sense and feel the tension around collective repression and war and, you know, the anger that is ultimately sits within our psyche, and where that has come from. In ultimately, we're dealing with displaced emotions and the woundedness that's associated with it. Okay. So I'm going to quickly press the refresh button over here on Patreon, and let's see what comes up for us over here. All right. So Kimberly Stargazer, you're asking, so when do the nodes shift to Cancer Capricorn, and when was the last time they were there 18 years ago? So yes, Cancer Capricorn, the nodes were in Cancer Capricorn. Well, the south node will be moving into Capricorn, and the north node will be moving into Cancer, and that shift would have taken place 18 years ago. Whereas 9 years ago, the nodes of the moon would have been, the north node would have been in Capricorn and the south node in Cancer, right? Because they take roughly 18 years to go around, right? So if I remember correctly, the nodes of the moon move into Cancer Capricorn on the 6th. And for those of you that are actually interested in human design and follow the nature of human design, the nodes have actually moved into the 60th gate. The south node is in the 60th gate, and the north node is in the 56th, which is in the throat. And that whole entire dynamic has actually created a specific connection where there is mutation taking place. For the next 4 months, there will be mutation taking place within our collective consciousness. So we are actually in a deep mutative phase right now. And you know, this is a time where things are going to be ultimately reshaping and changing for us. Okay. So I've had some wild occurrences show up already relating to relationships 18 years ago. Yeah, that's probably true. You know, you would be dealing with a lot of those dynamics that would come up. And again, this would all be related to how those themes played out for you. And if there is unresolved, you know, material that needs to be processed, that could come up for you as well. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So for anybody that is Patreon and you are watching this over here, make sure that you come over to the Patreon page, and on the full moon post, you'll see that this is where Kimberly's been posting. So if you've got another question for us, Kimberly, feel free to ask, by the way. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to look at some of maybe the questions that exist within our Google chat, and let's see what happens. Okay. So I'm having a look. All right. I'm not really sure what you're asking for, Night Cat. So if you bear with me for a second, I'll just move this over here so I can read that. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what you're actually asking for there, Night Cat, so I won't be able to do that. Teresa, nonviolent communication and nonviolent reaction is a great concept to apply healing, negotiating, conflict, transformation. Exactly. Conflict and trying to resolve conflict is an essential part of our ability to bypass the ego and its woundedness and to embrace where we can see the disconnect that is taking place. So it's actually about like trying to be more heart-centered in the experience and trying to, in a sense, like this is the real thing here. Okay. When you look at we wrote about this actually in the previous article, which was the new moon in Libra, right? We talked about how the heart has this purity. Okay, it's open, it's innocent, it wants to be open, it wants to be forgiving, it wants to. But when we experience things like abandonment or betrayal or loss, or we experience being, having our boundaries violated, or a wound that consumes us, when we respond from that place, we actually are manifesting from a place of revenge or a place of needing to inflict pain. And this south node of Chiron sitting here does influence and affect the way that we interact, because all of us, to some degree, have experienced a deep wound within inside of ourselves that when we access that and we respond from that place of pain, it's very difficult for us to feel open, to feel that we can embrace life essentially and trust it. So there's a lot of stuff that we're working through right now, individually and collectively, that is about ascending from the primal brain and its response mechanism, which is deeply rooted in fight or flight, and how that's conditioned our nervous system, to being more present with the higher cortex of our brain's capacity to sense empathy or to try and resolve conflict. Because ultimately what Uranus and Taurus is really doing is it's helping us become aware of the essential needs that are configured within us. Now, that's where a lot of conflict comes from, is that it's really just two people trying to find a common ground between measuring their differences and how those differences can be met or not met. And we're trying to learn essentially how to establish healthy boundaries so that we can feel within inside of ourselves more rejuvenated. So I would look at the nodes moving into Cancer Capricorn as a way in which we can begin to establish boundaries for ourselves that support the nurturing of our own personal needs, but in a sense also can be accommodating for, say, other people's needs in our lives if we are to be in relationships, or if we want to be in relationships, as an example, or we want to grow through that type of dynamic, right? Okay, so oh no, that's really, really bad. What has actually happened now is I've actually been logged out of Patreon, which means I can't actually access the comments that are in Patreon. And I wonder if that might have happened. Actually, I don't know why that would have happened, and I can't really log in because if I had to log in, I would need an authenticator code from the phone. So for anybody that's on Patreon at the moment and you're wanting to ask a question, can you write to me in the chat and just put the word Patreon next to it so that I know that question's coming from you over there. Okay. So while that's happening, I'm just going to kind of look at some questions that I could maybe respond to over here. Okay. So My natal north node is in Capricorn and south node is in Cancer, born late August 82. Right. Okay. So, you're gonna be having a nodal return at this point in time. Eddie is saying that, hi, I'm sensitive, or I have a sensitive subconscious. I'm a 12th houser. Yeah, totally. I reckon, that must be, I highly recommend that anybody that's got 12th house planets or having a 12th house transit, or anybody that's trying to work through deep Neptunian experiences within your life, to apply the Virgo process, which is ultimately to find a specific routine that you can do every single day that grounds your sense of physicalness, i.e., your body, into the physical world, and you practice a routine that supports the essentially coming back into the body, right? Because with 12th house energy, it's so easy to be disassociated, or to space out, or to be not present with the physical. So being able to do simple tasks that are routine based can help you bring you into the body in that experience. So Elizabeth is actually saying, could you speak on this regarding shame? Yeah, absolutely. This is a very important thing that is associated with the south node of Chiron in Aries and Libra. And technically, it's something that Uranus will be bringing to the surface as part of the healing mechanism, because a lot of the religious forms, and a lot of spiritual dogma as well, is rooted in shaming. I personally, with inside of myself, have to constantly work with the band of shame that exists around my Mars and Venus, because of just the context of them being in Virgo, but also how that's rooted in certain psychological and emotional states that occurred when I was younger. So shame is a really, really big thing to work through, in fact, and I think there's a lot of grieving that needs to take place as a way of purifying the shame. The feeling as if it's your fault. When you're a kid, your pineal gland is open. Your pituitary gland is responding to the nature of life, and it's absorbing everything in. And when you experience something from a parent or a situation that points to a wrongdoing, as it were, or a judgment on an experience, it's very easy for a child to internalize that process as if it's themselves, because why would mom and dad, or some loving being that is here to protect me ultimately, be wrong, right? And that's a lot of the reason why you would, during your Saturn return, need to process through some of the complexes that exist with your parents, just in the sense of re-rectifying certain displaced emotions that potentially existed when you were older. And I'm not saying that you have to in order for that to be resolved. It's an aspect of a Saturn return where you're renegotiating the way in which certain things may or may not have been okay for you when you were a kid, in that sense. But when I talk about the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, it releases endorphins into the body to soothe the pain. And at some point, the emotional layering of your subconscious will reach a point in which shame is the frequency that essentially comes off yourself when you feel like you've done something wrong, or when you feel like you've interacted with an experience and you've made a mistake. I mean, that's one of the reasons as to why people are so afraid to make mistakes, because the feeling of emotion that comes to the surface through making a mistake is not about trial and error, because we are human beings trying to, in this body, trying to make sense of this world, and yet there's so much incredible pressure to be successful and to be brilliant and to be this, and we don't actually relax into allowing ourselves to be exactly what we are, which is a bunch of people walking around in this planet trying to make sense of what it is that this existence is. And yet there's so much pressure to be successful at the age of 31. And I was talking to somebody the other day that I was sharing my own conclusions that I've come to, and sharing how that can help them as well, around allowing yourself to be okay where you are in your own growth process. Like, that's where you are right now for yourself, and to allow that to be validated, Uranus and Taurus, to validate that right now this is where you are at your capacity for growth. And anything outside of that is not going to, you're not going to manifest your dreams, if you consistently keep measuring where you are and what you're doing and thinking that you're failing at it, you've got to give yourself a tremendous amount of space to grow. I mean, that's why a lot of parents would want to encourage their children to make mistakes as a way of learning that life is about trial and error and trying things out and seeing how it works and seeing where your boundaries are, etc. So that's another thing that exists with the South Node in Chiron and how this links with the nodal axis, allowing us to actually operate from this inner light that's been shut down because we haven't been free enough to feel like it's okay to be ourselves without feeling shameful of us being, who we are. Okay, so Eddie was writing, sorry, John Smith, you're saying, does the transit node affect only if it touches the beginning degrees of a natal house, or it doesn't matter? So let me read that again. Does the transit node affect only if it touches the beginning of a house? I'm not entirely sure exactly how to answer that question because I'm not really sure I'm cognating it correctly. So I'm sorry, maybe if you can write it in a different way, I'd be able to help. But other than that, I'm really, from my side, unable to really understand what that means. Maybe somebody can write it in the chat. So Eddie Dude is writing, sometimes it's hard to open up and say what I really want to certain people due to past traumas and stuff. It's hard to understand my own emotions sometimes and how to express it. Absolutely. I mean, I'm like, you're not alone in that process, and I think many people in the world, if they were able to do that, would acknowledge the same thing. And it's a really great place to be. It's to acknowledge the fact that that's where we are right now is the first step in allowing us to accept that this is what we are. We're not some superhuman race that has developed these things. We're in that process of development. So if we're acknowledging that, we can actually see tools like nonviolent communication as an opportunity to nurture and grow and cultivate the development of this ability to express our feelings in a healthy way, and to in a sense become less and less affected by traumas of the past. Okay, so Celestial Infinity, Patreon, thanks very much for that, Celestial. Simon, can you speak to natal nodal return with North Node Cancer, South Node Capricorn? Okay, absolutely. I mean, it's not really that, how do I put this across? It's essentially what's happening for you right now is that you will go through a complete cycle of evolutionary development around your nodal axis. So just as when, Saturn return reaches a point, it's gone around the whole entire chart, or if you've got Venus that reaches the same point, your Venus return, it's the same thing, just with the nodes. So what you're dealing with here is that the original imprinting 18 years ago would have set off the seeds for new experiences to take place, right? So firstly, you're dealing with your nodes returning to each other, and then they start to move past the nodal point. Now, as they move past the nodal point, you've also got other transits taking place at that time. In other words, you've got maybe Saturn transiting your 11th house. And during those 18 years, Saturn would have transited all the way around and would have reached maybe the 4th house for something, or maybe a bit more actually, maybe your 6th house, right? So in that period of time that your nodes were moving around your chart, Saturn was integrating a specific aspect of your chart. So whenever we go through nodal returns, what we're essentially going through is the releasing and integration of, so firstly the integration of an entire evolutionary cycle that has been rooted in whatever transits you were dealing with at the time. Because the nodes are essentially just awareness points in which you're experiencing the integration of your life, right? That's how you can experience growth. It's because of the nodal axis. And the reason why I chose Saturn is because Saturn would be directly interfacing with the moon, because it's the moon and Saturn that is what creates the ego, right? It's the building blocks for the sense of identity as a human self, right? Saturn, Capricorn, 10th house, body, emotional relationship to that reality, moon. So what you're dealing with here is the nodal axis returning to a place, and then looking at go back to your charts, look at the nodal return 18 years ago, look where Saturn was, then look at where Saturn is now as this node returns, and then ask yourself the question, what has essentially been grown in your life in that period of time. And look at where Pluto was. Look at how, you get the point that I'm trying to make here, right? So this is an opportunity to see that you're about to reach a integration point around a big growth cycle. And this goes for everybody, of course. And when the nodes are reversed, in other words, you're having an inverse, so your south node is on your north node as an example, essentially you're just reaching the halfway point. So you would be integrating past dynamics into the future while simultaneously letting go of past dynamics that are related to new potential. Okay. So let's have a look. Teresa, it's uncanny how evolutionary astrology concepts explain and relate how the world, the external, is demonstrating wounds through war, disconnect, fear, destruction as we experience internally. Absolutely, our own disconnect. And that's something that as a human race, we have chosen to embody as an evolutionary trajectory. So it's essentially just the nature of creation experiencing itself, and the human race is just on this planet with all the other forms of life going, oh, okay, we're part of this journey over here and we're embodying this experience. The difference is we're awake to that conscious experience. And now we're even more awake to that conscious experience, but we don't necessarily have the tools available to us right now that are sharp enough for us to accept ourselves as what we are, right? So we're working through a lot of this anger and a lot of this, this need to be aggressive and to fight and to point fingers and to be so disconnected in the heart, versus for us to be able to allow ourselves to feel our own sadness, to feel our own depression, to feel our own pain, and from that place birth tools that can support us in essentially nursing those experiences together. Okay. All right, so Eclipse Tarot, and that's Stargazer. Thanks very much for writing Patreon. Could you speak about all the planets in Scorpio right now? This is my 6th house, Scorpio. It feels exhausting. Yeah, I'm not surprised it feels exhausting with something in the 6th house. You're constantly purifying a tremendous amount, and your body is probably turning around to you and saying to you at this time that you need to really look at the routine that you have, and how does that routine support effective energy use. That's step one. And then I would say, with regards to the planets in Scorpio right now, we're dealing with the archetypal essence of mutation. So this is mutative. This is an energy of change that's taking place, but not change as a cardinal sign, which is the initiation of change. It's change in the sense that the form, the alchemical process, like Jen wrote in New Moon and the Full Moon article, she talked about how these 4 points of the pyramid are the 4 points of the fixed cross, and then inside of it is your center. It's your 5th element, and the 5th element is your divine cosmic connection. It's the essence of what electrifies you to go, yeah, this is what I'm here for. This is my inspiration. This is the thing that goes, oh yeah, this is where I want to follow. I want to follow that point. I want to follow that point. Whether it be to be an engineer that wants to innovate and recreate the way that we see automobiles in the world, to somebody that is just deeply in love with painting abstract art. Whatever it is to you, this is your vortex of centeredness that when you access, time doesn't exist. For me, it's one of these moments. I love doing this, interacting over here as an example. So the point that I'm wanting to put across with this energy pattern is that with the transformation of the 5th element, the body has an alchemical process. I mean, it's biologically designed to be able to alchemicize the way in which it grows. Alchemy is a real thing. And I can get deep into the process of how that exists within the pineal gland and how it exists within the endocrine system. But, the point here is that these fixed cross points are all pointing to an alchemical process of deep mutation, So that's what will take place. So wherever that's sitting in your chart, you're having this mutation take place. It's changing you radically. So for you, Eclipse, it's existing within the deep process of your own personal relationship to your health and the personal relationship to what you consider to be the most efficient way that you run your day-to-day activities. and also how are you getting rest, as an example, you know, sixth house, and perfection potentially as well. Okay. Oh wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. That I that's a super chat donation. Thank you very much, Eclipse. I really appreciate that. Um, Feel free to ask the questions if you want to. Okay. So let's have a look. Uranus is now transiting my seventh house, and it's going to conjunct my Neptune and North Node. What could this be potentially for me? Okay. All right, so Uranus is transiting your seventh house, and it's conjunct your Neptune and North Node. What could this potentially mean for me? All right, well, Uranus transiting your seventh house is essentially going to ask you, okay, up until this point in time, what's your name, Cappy? Okay, so up until this point in time, Cappy, you have negotiated what you consider to be fair and not fair in a relationship. You've started out the perception of a relationship in this way. You've interacted with people, and you've defined yourself in relationships a specific way. Uranus comes along and says, those ways of doing those things are outdated anymore, and I'm going to start to shake up experiences and radically transform the way that you define yourself within the context of relationship. And I'm going to do this by constantly keep on sending you sudden shocks of change that will open you up to seeing that the pattern of relationship dynamics that you have within yourself are needing to be accelerated in a sense, right? But you would also probably be dealing with subconscious memories of prior lifetimes where there has been sudden changes in relationship dynamics that you haven't had clarity on. And so you might also be working through some psychological emotions and other lifetimes bleeding through into this lifetime, and other personalities that are still stuck in the Bardo state that are needing attention, cosmic attention, for you to resolve through, you know. And it's just about allowing yourself to breathe, Uranus, through these transits in the seventh house. So yeah, okay. So Eddie, all the planets are in Scorpio and are transiting my 10th house. Yep, that's for me as well. That's why it's I feel like I've been running through a gauntlet, to be honest, but gracefully as well. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh my God, woe is me. It's just more along the lines of, okay, this is what my soul obviously chose to happen at this point in time. And we'll just, you know, all pass. All the planets in Scorpio are transiting my 10th house. Yep. And some of my natal planets. Okay. Eclipse, you're welcome. That's my first time using Super Chat feature. Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that, by the way, super much. Storm Slaughter, Sagittarius, Sun in the 8th house, Taurus Ascendant, Aquarius, Venus. You have Aquarius, Venus in your 10th square, Moon, Scorpio, and Venus is retrograde transiting my 6th house at the moment, and it's conjunct my Scorpio Moon. I'm so tense I could shriek. Yes. I would also feel that way if I had those transits. Ultimate blessings to you, completely. It definitely feels that way. Just by reading it, to be honest. Go take a Himalayan salt bath, or, you know, go get some hot water, for instance, and put yourself in the hot water and give yourself some salt bath so that your body nourishes itself. Go have a massage or something, right? Amy Melissa, hey Amy, Scorpios have been reviving my first house. Well, yeah, I can. Scorpio is in your first house. Okay. All right. So yes, because Libra is. Yep. That's correct. Okay. So first house Pluto, if I'm mistaken. Yeah. Okay, Amy. So what has taken place for you in your life that has changed your path? What have you recommitted to, or what have you felt that you've needed to let go of that is now initiating a completely new direction for yourself? Okay. Teresa, I have Moon and Uranus tripping in the 10th house where Chiron lives. Ouch. So the one advice that I want to give to anybody that's got Uranus in your 10th house or Uranus transiting your 10th house is give yourself enough breathing space to feel that when you put all of your attention in a specific direction and it doesn't materialize for yourself, to go, oh, okay, right, damn it, that sucked a lot. I put a lot of attention into it and it didn't materialize in the way that I wanted to. So I'm going to kind of withdraw that, take a little bit of time off in that sense, and then go back and try a different route. Okay, because Uranus in the 10th house natally and transiting Uranus in the 10th house can correlate to psychological states of depression, because you're so focused on needing to change your life direction, because Uranus is saying, come on, change your life direction, that when you do actually give yourself the space to go, so I'm going to commit to this, Capricorn, Uranus goes, I was only kidding. That wasn't really the direction you needed to go. It was just part of your awakening process. And you don't really actually see anything materialize for yourself, or you do all of the hard work and you not get recognized for it. And that sends you into a state of deep futility. So if you have this transit, please give yourself enough space to be okay with how life is going to treat you, because wherever Uranus sits in the chart, it's never ever going to be consistent manifestation. For those of you that got Uranus in your 5th house, that's going to be one of those cycles as well, where you're going to feel like you're self-actualized, your book is just about to be released into the world, and you've put so much in, it's your destiny, and then 6 months later, you're like, nobody's reading my book. Because Uranus is like, okay, that was the point. It was just to awaken feeling of creative self-actualization. It wasn't actually going to be followed through with, right? Whereas Saturn is a different story. Okay. Amy, revving like a car. I feel like I'm driving with my eyes closed. Brilliant. Uranus is now in my 5th, moving into my 6th. Okay. Okay. So, is there any more people that are on Patreon at the moment that are on the stream that have maybe written in the threads that I have been locked out of, that you could write in the comments? I see that there's still the 5 comments, so it doesn't look like that's the case. I think I'm going to take one or 2 more questions. And maybe I'd like to hear some feedback from everybody around if the stream was actually useful, if you found that you got something out of this and that it contributed to your overall excitement for learning astrology, your interest in wanting to get deeper into your astrology chart. This would be an awesome opportunity to let everybody know that we have been working really, really hard at building our new Evolutionary Astrology School, which is essentially completely online, and it's going to be available on the 15th of November, the foundation course all the way through to advanced course, and it's completely self-study. You do it at your own pace, and there's an option to be certified as well if you would like to take that. So for any of you that are interested in actually learning astrology, this new astrology school that we've both, myself and Jen, have taken a lot of time to really create it in a beautiful way to not only show that astrology can be fun to learn, but also not boring in the sense of reading a book and just having like literature, but actually interacting with it in a fun way. So whenever you feel called to maybe study astrology, keep that in mind, yeah? Okay. So let's have a look. Esha, yes, great. It resonated. Some questions answered. Fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. Yes, Storm Slaughter, yes, good. I wish I'd be able to get you sooner. Just returned from the dentist. Oh my gosh. So out of sheer curiosity, Storm Slaughter, do you have any Saturn transits with your Neptune or Pisces at the moment? Saturn transiting your 12th house, or Neptune transiting Saturn, or some Neptune-Saturn contact that has brought you to go to the dentist? Okay. Penelope, I did level 1, and we'll do the next one. Yep. Okay. So Jocelyn, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter in Scorpio transiting my 12th house. Oh my gosh. So my encouraging words to you are you sort of hibernating at this point in time? It's a really, really great opportunity to really get deep into the core essence of yourself, and to not get overly identified with certain, you're really going into your psyche at this point in time. So you're probably deeply sensitive to energy around you. And so I encourage you to go and stimulate some more mystical experiences, right? Like go out into nature and connect with your own divine essence. You'd be surprised at what type of stuff you can actually download with a 12th house transit. Okay. Oh my god, right, Teresa was saying, oh my god, I do, and the dentist also. Yeah, that's right. Penelope, Jupiter's on your ascendant this week. Yep, new direction for you. Jocelyn, illustrating my children's book. Wow, that's cool. Talk about relieving, like allowing your dreams to come into fruition, right? That's amazing. Super happy to hear that that is the case. And oh my Josie, Mezi, Mezi my. That's a cool name. Fourth house, Jupiter return, 27 degrees. Congratulations on your Jupiter return. I hope that this energy is treating you really, really well. Penelope, I'm excited to have Jupiter move into Sagittarius. Me too, because that's where my Jupiter sits at the moment. And I'm looking forward to Jupiter conjunct my Uranus. Okay. All right, peeps. Thank you very, very much for sharing this space with me today. As always, I'm super excited to have been able to share this with you, and that you got a lot out of this. And until our next live Q&A next month on the full moon, have a wonderful month, and I'll chat to you during the week or during the next weeks with our video and article on the new and not the new moon, the nodal shift that's taking place in Cancer Capricorn. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.